ever felt like you were meant to be part of something bigger, then maybe Unitology is for you. Founded 200 years ago by our savior, Michael Altman, Unitologists believe that one day, all mankind will be united through the power of a sacred artifact known as the Marker. We call this process convergence. Imagine it. All mankind brought together with one purpose, with one mind, with one soul. No war, no fear, no hate. If that sounds like an ideal world to you, then look no further. Convergence is coming, and Unitology is helping it happen.
The follow-up to EA and Visceral Games' 2008 survival horror in space game sets its sights higher than before by promising more varied locations, more enemies, more ways to kill said enemies, and multiplayer. Dead Space 2 is set 3 years after the events of the first Dead Space. Isaac Clarke finds himself in what appears to be a mental hospital of some sort, with the opening in-game engine cinematic showing that he is losing his mind. Soon afterward, a friendly man is trying to help him escape and, we'll just say things don't go so well. Dead Space 2 starts you off on an action-paced footing and very quickly reacquaints players with the controls while also cleverly giving Isaac back his main staples of the game, a kinesis module, a stasis module, and a trusty plasma cutter. The reintroduction of these tools feels very natural and definitely could have been done in a much worse or contrived way. Players will then be taking Isaac through the Sprawl, a giant city on what is left of Titan, one of Saturn's moons and the first planetoid to be cracked in the Dead Space universe's history. The Sprawl has a variety of locations that will have players moving through mall-like shopping areas, residential apartments, a Church of Unitology cathedral, and more. At first, the variety of locations is refreshing, but will eventually get bland as players return to areas they've already been to until the game finally moves to new locales later on. It is disappointing, however, that the Sprawl never really feels all that huge. There are very few open areas to play through, and the majority of the game is again set in tight corridors. If it wasn't for the ability to look out of windows and see the massive cityscape taking up most of the view, most players could easily assume they were just on another spaceship like the Ishimura all over again. A nice touch this time around is the lack of a tram sequence between chapters. Dead Space 2 instead keeps its cohesion intact by simply not having any loading screens during the game. The only time you can tell something is loading is a long elevator ride or doors that take a few seconds to open. Enemy design is also slightly more varied this time around. However, by about midway through the game, players will have seen every type of enemy, and instead of finding new ones later on, will again be fighting the harder charred skin-looking enemies that they have been fighting the entire time. This is disappointing, as all the main necromorph enemies from Dead Space return as the mainstay of enemies in Dead Space 2, with only a few additions like the Puker, the Pack, and the Crawlers showing up more often. This isn't to say that the necromorphs out of Sprawl aren't good looking. In fact, Dead Space 2 is an absolutely beautiful game with high-resolution textures and some of the best lighting effects seen in any game to date. Enemy designs look equally good, with some truly inspired designs here and there. The overall look of Dead Space 2 hasn't changed much from the original. The old "if it isn't broke, don't fix it" thought, but the little extras in the visuals department add up. The audio doesn't disappoint either. Enemy sounds, weapon sounds, and the near lack of sound in a vacuum all sound fantastic. The voice acting is well done, and Isaac has turned in his Gordon Freeman routine to speak for himself this time around. As a character, he does feel a little flat, and the constant "Isaac is going nuts" part isn't really played up that much in his voice acting, but it is still nice to hear him speak. Unfortunately, there is a distinct lack of audio and video logs to find this time around, with the majority of the logs found being text. Another returning staple of Dead Space is the power nodes and the upgrading of equipment. However, don't expect to find enough nodes to upgrade everything in one playthrough. On my first time through, I found enough to upgrade my rig and stasis completely and only had a few left for weapons. Also returning are the special power node locked doors, which feature random items inside them, with the exceptions of any schematics. So be ready to carry around one power node with you at all time for those. Visceral Studios also decided to let players change the difficulty of their New Game Plus options, allowing them to take all credits, suits, weapons, and upgrades to the next game, even at higher difficulties, except for Hardcore mode. New Game Plus also features new suit schematics to find, which are upgraded versions of the suits players can find in their original playthrough. This definitely makes it easier to work on the harder difficulties by using completed saves, though it should be noted that Hardcore mode is not available as a New Game Plus setting. However, this brings me to a gripe I have with Dead Space 2, and that is it really seems like the developers wanted people to do the casual mode a few times and upgrade everything before trying any higher difficulty. Playing through on normal for my first playthrough felt well paced and fun until about 3/4 of the way through the game. Then I constantly found myself low on ammo and health packs, trying to deal with tougher versions of enemies and rooms full of them. In fact, the final boss fight was nigh on impossible because of the lack of ammo and health. And playing through on the casual setting is a cakewalk, even without all the upgrades. Dead Space also features an 8-player multiplayer mode that borrows heavily from Left 4 Dead in its 4 human and 4 necromorph players, with each side switching sides at the end of every round design. However, this isn't a bad thing, as if you're going to be inspired for undead multiplayer, you might as well be inspired by the best. The basic setup has the humans needing to complete objectives, while the necromorphs basically just try to kill the humans to keep them from completing those objectives. The humans are stronger than the necromorphs and do more damage with their weapons, but the necromorphs have the advantages of being able to spawn almost anywhere on the map, and they respawn faster than the humans. The multiplayer also borrows from other shooters with an experience and leveling system that allows players to earn new suits and weapons as the humans, or stronger attacks when they are the necromorphs. While the multiplayer is a fun diversion, I don't foresee it having a ton of staying power versus other multiplayer games on the market. Unfortunately, the experience system is skewed more towards kills than completing objectives as humans, as you get far more experience for killing an enemy than you do for completing an objective. As an example, in one game, I single-handedly completed every objective, and all of them in a single life except for the last one, but ended up third on my team in terms of points because I wasn't killing enemies as much. Then, when we switched to the necromorph side, I got something like 17 kills and came in top on my team in terms of points that round. It should also be noted that the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 versions are pretty much identical, with 2 exceptions. First, the Xbox 360 version comes on 2 discs, while the PS3 version is on 1 Blu-ray. Second, the first printing of the PS3 version also comes with a high-definition version of the Wii game Dead Space Extraction, with new graphics and PlayStation Move support. This bonus is only for the first printing. Dead Space 2 is a great game overall. The story flows well, there's plenty of action, and there's decent, if not necessarily sustainable, multiplayer mode. Considering it's only the beginning of the year, we already have a good contender for survival horror game of the year to look at. Fans of Dead Space or survival horror in general won't be disappointed in Dead Space 2.
I've just walked one big fucking circle today.
We'll get through this. Let's figure out how to meet up. Isaac, we're all gonna burn for what we did to you.